Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. There's been a lot of speculation about this movie. For some reason, a ton of people were looking to this film in particular as like a signpost for whether the MCU was going to get its act together after Phase 4 was pretty rocky, or if it's going to go straight down the toilet from here. I don't really know why, since the guy who made it doesn't even work for Marvel anymore, but that's more or less what the sentiment was. So if that's what we're going by, then I guess the news is good, but also bad. Because I like the movie, I thought it did a lot of things right, but James Gunn is at DC now. So does that mean anything for Marvel going forward? Regardless of how Volume 3 turned out, Marvel is still losing one of their best writer-directors, one of their best creatives, and after this movie, I definitely think James Gunn deserves to be called that. So what does it mean for Marvel? Well, it means they made a great Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, but without James Gunn, in the future, they may be in worse trouble than they were in already. What really struck me about this movie, and what makes it so good to start with, is how skillfully it avoided so many of the mistakes that plagued the MCU in Phase 4, like the over-reliance on silly, shitty comedy. Not that there isn't any comedy in the movie, there is. The jokes all land pretty well, and there are no groaners in there, that's the important thing. But I'd say it's less funny than the previous two films, and that was intentional because it's a darker story. And that's where Gunn avoids another pitfall, being afraid to tackle darker or more mature stuff. If you ask 100 Marvel fans what the best thing in Phase 4 was, most of them will probably say No Way Home, which was one of the biggest movies Marvel has done and also easily the darkest of the Marvel Spider-Man movies. So you'd think that Marvel would get the idea that maybe that's the direction they should be heading in, where they try to tackle some darker themes. They need to get into that headspace anyway before the X-Men show up or they're gonna be in real trouble. But anyway, for most of Phase 4, they were going in the opposite direction and doubling down on the comedy, which was getting worse and worse because they kept hiring writers who are not f***ing funny. I'm looking at you, Jessica Gao. But lucky for this movie, James Gunn is smarter than that. One, because he's actually funny, and two, because he seemed to know which way the wind was blowing and made a movie that feels a lot more like what fans like me have been asking for. Dialing back on the comedy, getting more serious, not losing what got them to the dance, but not being afraid to grow up a little bit, and three, leaving the politics at home. How refreshing to have a Marvel project that wasn't bombarding us with her hero stuff, or lecturing politicians, or making its male leads roll around in a field of flowers, or playing second fiddle while female characters get ramrodded into lead positions they wouldn't otherwise be in because feminism. There's none of that here. And this is why people like the female characters in Guardians of the Galaxy, because Gamora, Nebula, Mantis, even Cosmo the dog, they're not there to be the strong female characters, they're just characters who are fun and cool and kick-ass and are as broken and flawed as everybody else. You see how easy that is when you're not trying to force an agenda down our f***ing throats? But backpedaling a little bit here, I think people should know what they're in for with Volume 3 ahead of time, because if you're expecting the same type of over-the-top, wacky, fun stuff from the first two films, you may be disappointed. Not that it isn't in there, it is, but the caveat to this one getting more serious is that it's easily the darkest Guardians movie. Sure, when it's funny, but when it's dark, it's as serious as a heart attack. Several of the actors got to stretch their dramatic muscles here. Chris Pratt, Bradley Cooper. It's also very sad at times. Rocket's backstory, oh my god, there are some big emotional gut punches in that thing. It's borderline disturbing, but again, that was intentional, so well done on that. And a lot of this is to do with the High Evolutionary. I think he is the best villain of the trilogy because he feels the most personal. More personal than Ego? That feels weird to say, but I'm saying it because the High Evolutionary gets some even deeper dramatic cuts than Ego got. Like what he puts Rocket through? Holy shit. If cruelty to animals is one of your hot buttons, you're just gonna be seething with anger. Just shaking in your seat waiting for the Guardians to this guy up. He's a very, very hateable villain. But he's also kind of a tricky thing because he's well written and the actor did great, but I was left with questions about him. Like, where did this guy come from? What made him this way? They do explain his motivation. He hates things the way they are. Okay, but Why? Why is he the way he is? I ask because they revealed that High Evolutionary actually has been manipulating various things in the Guardians trilogy for a while. Kinda like Thanos did, I guess, but Thanos had a backstory. That's what was missing here. The High Evolutionary is a super powerful, sadistic, depraved madman who comes out of nowhere with some pretty crazy and complicated ambitions, but without knowing how he came to be this way, he's a bit of an incomplete puzzle. Also, I wasn't wild about the character design. Would it have been that difficult to put the purple face mask from the comics on him? There's even a flashback scene that would have been the perfect opportunity to get him into that thing, but they just don't go for it. I don't know why. But as a character, High Evolutionary works well. That's something that's always been very prevalent in these movies. James Gunn is really good with characters. Everybody's evolving, some in really heartfelt ways, others in some pretty surprising ways. Like Gamora, for example. Gunn made a pretty brave choice with Gamora's arc that I really appreciated. And I wasn't even liking Gamora for a big chunk of the movie because she was so angry. Gamora's really angry in this movie, almost to a point that something felt wrong with her. But I had to remind myself, and the movie has to remind us, that this isn't our Gamora. She's not a replacement for our Gamora, and we learned that along with the characters. This new Gamora hasn't been through what the other one went through. She's had different experiences, so she's a different person. She makes different choices. And not everyone may like those choices, but I had to respect them because it was poignant. It was smart writing. Mantis was another one who stood out. She really blossomed as a character in the holiday special, and that continues here. Mantis gets to be a lot more proactive now, especially in action scenes. I didn't think her powers would lend themselves well to action scenes, but they actually do, in some really fun ways. Then there's Nebula, and well, Nebula's always awesome, but she continues to level up with her cybernetics, and she has one of the best arcs in the trilogy, too. Drax is still a big scene stealer. The way his story wraps up makes total sense. And Quill, his arc finishes almost exactly the way I always wanted it to. I can't say it without spoiling something, but it's pretty much perfect. With just about everyone, they get the ending that it feels like they earned. And also, put an asterisk next to ending because this might not be the last time we see all these characters, in case that's something you were worried about. So, the villain was good, albeit missing a backstory. Character work was on point. What about the technical stuff? Thankfully, the VFX department didn't slack off this time. The MCU has put out some movies lately where the CG was unimpressive or the effects weren't finished. There was this thing. I mean, what the f***? But not this time. This movie looks great. Everything was polished. I didn't notice any effects where they dropped the ball, and considering what they had to pull off, that's impressive as hell. There's one sequence in particular that shows how much James Gunn has leveled up as a director. It's a huge hallway fight between the Guardians and a squad of big CG cyborg monstrosities that is so good, I think it's one of the best fight scenes in the MCU, period. It's like Gunn watched those awesome hallway fight scenes from Netflix Daredevil and thought, I want to do that, but I'm gonna throw the most gigantic kitchen sink I can find at it in the process. I have no idea how they did this, but the entire fight scene is one take with no cuts, and it goes for a while too. And the technical precision required to pull this off was mind-blowing because it's so chaotic, and there are so many different moving parts to it, with the actors having to interact not just with each other, but with CG characters who were not there on set with them, and they still had to hit all their marks. And you're also applying CG to the actors too, like when Nebula's cybernetics do funky stuff, and then you've got the Guardians teaming up and working together to take these CG creatures down as the camera's panning all over the place, and everything has to be done perfectly. I can't say enough about it. This had to be one of the most complex sequences the MCU has ever done. My jaw was on the floor. I couldn't believe they did that all in one shot. F***ing incredible stuff. So, needless to say, the action, big thumbs up on that. Now, let's talk about who dies, because that's the other big thing people were worried about. This is how savvy James Gunn is, because he definitely knew people would be anticipating this, so the movie plays on a lot of expectations and does multiple fake-outs. In fact, it delights in doing these fake-outs. And they're not cheap, they're well done, but it started getting nerve-wracking after a while, because every character gets a moment where I was leaning forward in my seat like, oh shit, here it comes, this is the big death right here, and every single time I got it wrong. Every time. And as for who does or doesn't kick the bucket, well, I won't spoil it, but I think James Gunn made the right decision. No complaints from me. I felt good about the choice he made. It felt right. And some people may disagree, but with what he puts these characters through, I think Gunn earned this one. And regardless of what others may think, it was a very heartfelt choice. And that's something that sets the Guardians of the Galaxy apart from a lot of the other stuff the MCU has done lately, especially in Phase 4. There's a ton of heart in this film, and it resonates so much with the found family theme. By the end of the movie, these characters really feel like a family. I cried 3 separate times, and I was very impressed that a movie that goes as dark as this does could still have such a feel-good, heartwarming message and through line through the whole trilogy, really. And that's so baffling, because how can they get it so right in this movie, whereas in stuff like Thor Love and Thunder, they're trying to milk sitcom-style humor out of a woman dying of cancer? Makes no sense to me. I do have a couple nitpicks, though, just so you don't think I'm kissing Marvel's butt on this one. Adam Warlock is not in the movie as much as you might think, and if there was one case of them going too comedic, it was with him. He does get some more dignified moments, I guess, but that portrayal I wasn't crazy about. I'm not super familiar with Adam Warlock in the comics, but I'm pretty sure this version is almost nothing like him. Also, Nathan Fillion is in the movie, and he's kind of wasted. I mean, sure, he's good, but why use Nathan Fillion in a fairly small one-off role like this when you could have saved him for a more important role in something else? Come on! This is Captain f***ing Hammer we're talking about here! Nathan Fillion should be a superhero!
The hammer is my penis.
And lastly, I think they went a little overboard with the soundtrack this time. The music in these movies has always been robust, but in this one, I felt like they were just pummeling me into submission with the song choices. It could have done with a little less of this. I see what you're doing, James Gunn. You didn't have to do it quite so much. Sometimes you can just let the orchestral stuff do its thing. But nitpicks aside, I really enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This, to me, is a top-tier MCU movie, and certainly better than anything in Phase 4 outside of No Way Home. It was exciting, it was dramatic, it was sad, it was uplifting, it got more serious like I've been wanting the MCU to get. If this is the last time we see these characters, it felt like a fitting ending, and we're leaving them in a good place, and I couldn't ask for much more than that. So, well done, James Gunn. You did good, you stuck the landing, and Marvel will definitely be worse off without you, but I'm pretty excited to see what you're gonna do with DC now. Kudos. Thanks so much for watching, and while you're here, do all the other YouTube things. Ding the bell icon and follow my social media to be notified when I upload new stuff. The links are down there. And most importantly, don't forget to hit that thumbs up and leave a comment, share the video, subscribe, and make sure you're still subscribed, because what really deserves to be warped into a twisted cyborg monstrosity only to be destroyed at the whims of a god complex having psychopath is the YouTube algorithm. That's all for now, but I'll be back with more soon. So take care, stay tuned, I'll see you next time.